Okay, so I saw Mary Poppins Returns the other day. It wasn't terrible, which is surprising considering it's another bloody Disney remake slash sequel, and it was directed by the same guy who did Into the Woods, which was awful, and Chicago, which is terrible. Why my internet's being weird? Privacy error? What the fuck? Not secure. What? This is a bit of a curveball. Okay, I'm gonna just do a quick scan. Anyway, back to Mary Poppins. Yeah, I liked it. I mean, that does have something to do with the fact that I like Emily Blunt an awful lot, but she was in Into the Woods and it was still bad. So, it captured the magic, definitely. I mean, what it did primarily is pretty much use the same formula as the original, except it changed it to the point where it was definitely a new story. Like, it wasn't a cookie-cutter copy. You know how the original Mary Poppins started? It was like the kids lost in the park. They go home, they meet Mary Poppins, and then there's a bit where they go to the bank, and then they get lost in the fog, and then they meet Bert, but in this case they meet Jack the Lamplighter, and of course instead of Bert the Chimney Sweeper, there's Jack the Lamplighter. And I remember when they get lost in the fog, in the original it's like Step in Time, the Chimney Sweeps, and then this time it's the Lamplighters doing their dance, and of course you meet one of Mary Poppins' relatives, and there's a song and dance number there. Personally, I preferred the original in that note, because, you know what, I've never really seen the appeal of Meryl Streep. I've only seen her in like a handful of films, and I think she's like mediocre at best. Granted, one of those was Into the Woods. It was awful. From what I understand, she was far better in the 70s and the 80s. And that's how she actually became a household name, as the films she did back then, rather than the films she's doing now, although I will say I did really like her in Mamma Mia. But then I love those films. So, it works. There were a few things I didn't like about Mary Poppins Returns. For example, this will contain spoilers, it will be in the title, but just so you know, if you don't want to know, don't watch. Is that it... You know, at one point they go into a cartoon world, as they did in the original, go into this one, and then there's this whole segment which involves, like, a chase where there's a big bad wolf stealing their shit or something, and it's this ridiculous carriage chase where they're, like, gonna fall off or the world or whatever, and I'm just like, this is completely unnecessary. It didn't fit into the narrative, really. It was just a case of, ooh, this is what films do these days. They put in pointless action scenes. Let's do one. And it was just like, I'm just sitting there like, this is completely unnecessary. Like, completely. It didn't even matter. And it turned out to be some metaphor about greed or whatever, and then, well, maybe not greed, a metaphor for maybe acting or thinking too quickly about certain things. But then, of course, the wolf has, like, a stopwatch, a pocket watch on a chain, and one of the youngest kids sees a shadow of him, like, swinging it, and that was the other thing I didn't like about the film, is that the original Mary Poppins, let me ask you this, did it have a villain? No. I mean, the bank, well, they were bankers, they're naturally a bit dubious, but they weren't villains. I mean, then you had, George Banks, who was something of an antagonist, but mostly he was just a ridiculous man who was a distant father. He wasn't a villain. And if anything, Mary Poppins came to help him. Perhaps more so than the Banks children. In the original, anyway. In the new one, it's kind of the same thing over again. He's come to help the Banks children as well as Jane and Michael, who are now grown up. But the inclusion of a villain just seemed unnecessary. And the pocket watch, it's a case if they go to the bank later and they see Colin Firth, who is about to take their home or whatever, he's like telling lies to Michael Banks, saying, yes, we'll give you every assurance, you'll keep your house, but really he's just like, no, they're not going to keep their house, ha ha ha, twirling his evil mustache or whatever. The thing is, the inclusion of the pocket watch number was completely redundant, because even if the kid had recognised the pocket watch as belonging to the bad guy, it didn't matter, because they then went and overheard the guy saying that he's not going to help their dad anyway. So it just seemed completely pointless and sort of filler. Like, what the hell? There was but yeah, there my okay, there's another criticism, but my main two were the inclusion of that chase scene and the inclusion of a villain. There was another one, is that that's the thing I liked about the end of the first Mary Poppins, is there were no bad guys. Everybody won. I mean, even the old man whose name I regrettably do not remember. You know, the manager of the bank, Dick Van Dyke, playing an old man. In the end of the first one, he died from laughing because he had such a good time with that once met a man with a wooden leg named Smith joke, which is a fucking great joke, by the way. And then, but at the end of Mary Poppins Returns, when they're all up in the air with the balloons, and you have to pick the right balloon, otherwise you don't go flying, Colin Firth tried to take one and just fell flat. Whereas that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't have happened in the original Mary Poppins. Everybody gets their happily ever after. That's kind of the point. I love that about Mary Poppins. I feel like he should have been allowed to see, if only for a moment, the joy of childhood, of magic. And even if, like, he could have been able to, because then the old lady who is selling the balloons says to Mary Poppins, all the grown-ups will forget by tomorrow anyway. So I think it would have been a good thing, just to give him that little moment in the sun, even if his character was mostly pointless. I understand they were trying to add like an element of drama to the plot with the threat of losing the house. But, and I feel like in some ways my initial opinion was that the loss of Michael Banks's wife may have been enough to drive a wedge between himself and his children to warrant Mary Poppins returning, but I also feel like maybe that was a little bit too much like the original. From start to finish, the film is fun. Don't get me wrong, it is so much fun. The only part I didn't overtly enjoy was the chase scene. I feel like that could have been completely cut out and the film would have gone on perfectly well without it. And the rest of the music was wonderful. The songs were definitely recaptured the magic of the original. Mary Poppins, I'm calling her that now. Emily Blunt's singing voice was incredible. And I feel like she knocked it out of the park. She was absolutely magnificent. I remember seeing the trailers and thinking that she was laying the accent on a bit too thick, but in the film, it didn't seem to matter. It seemed to blend pretty well. The only other part I didn't really like was, not aesthetically speaking, at least not in terms of the original Mary Poppins, is the bath time scene, where they go into the bath and it's like underwater. The CGI was not good. It seemed really quite weird and a bit awkward watching them float around like they were on a green screen wearing harnesses. Because honestly, that's what I saw when I looked at it. Maybe I just know too much about behind the scenes stuff now from all the films I've watched and all the documentaries and whatever, but it didn't blend very well for me. It looked pretty bad. The song was fun, and I liked the concept, but the CGI wasn't very good. Sorry, I'm just making a tweet. I just saw something that resonated with me. It's something it's by Digibro. It says, romance is finding a billion ways to say the same thing. And I agree. I am primarily a writer of romances. I hate that word, but it's true. I write love stories, primarily speaking, with other elements thrown in. And I find that the more I go, the more I'm just telling the same story over and over again, which is perhaps why I don't finish a lot of my stories. Anyway, Mary Poppins Returns was fun. It had several unnecessary themes, like the character of that one scene, and The CGI could have been a lot better in that one segment. I don't usually go in for romantic subplots, but between Jack and Jane, the lamplighter, and Jane Banks, it was actually quite sweet, and it seemed not like it was shoehorned in. It was just the way they flirted with each other. It was quite genuine, I feel. It worked for me. I liked it, and it was quite sweet. And in the end, I will admit I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get a little kiss between them, but I also understand that it's one, a Mary Poppins film, and two, well, it's for kids. Kids don't, at least not at the age I think that the film was aimed at, like 5 years old. Most kids don't go in for smoochies. I would know. I used to be 5, long, long ago. But yeah, I like that aspect. I feel like Ben Wishaw's moustache looked fake. Now this is a nitpick, but it did seem to. Every time he was on screen, I felt like getting like a pair of scissors and just trimming it because it was just going a little bit too over his front lip. I was like, dude, when was the last time you looked in a mirror? It doesn't look good. It looks a bit silly. But he can sing. I like Ben Whishaw. I haven't seen him in much. I'm not actually sure I've seen him in anything, because though I've seen both Paddington films and he voices Paddington, it's not technically him. And no, I haven't seen that one James Bond film he's in. I'm not a big fan of James Bond. Although I know he's in it. But yeah, he was good. Good singing voice. In fact, they all sang very well. The other segment in the cartoon bit, with the chase, the rapping song about the segment about the book covers, the cover of the book, I actually couldn't understand what they were saying half the time. I'm not sure it's because my ears or the pace of the song or the accent. They put on a rather Cockney accent for it, and I'm not sure if my ears are just not tuned to that very well, at least not in singing. It was very entertaining, but I couldn't actually figure out what was going on. Like, when they got to the chorus, it was like that was the only bit I know. I was like, okay, yes, I recognize this bit, but the rest of it seemed a bit incomprehensible. See, I liked Mary Poppins Returns. There were aspects of it that I don't like, but overall, it's not a bad film. It doesn't measure up to the original, but then how could it? If, say, the original Mary Poppins was a solid, I'm gonna say 9 out of 10. It was something that I actually noticed while watching the films. I actually don't like Mary Poppins that much, the character. I feel she's a bit too snooty sometimes. That's just my personal opinion. But if the original Mary Poppins is a solid 9 out of 10, I'd say that Mary Poppins Returns is maybe about a 7 out of 10. Wasn't bad, could have been better. Could have done without a couple of scenes and segments, and gosh darn, they could have done that bathing scene without so much shitty CGI. They really could. The cast worked well. I imagine the children did well. I honestly didn't like them that much personally, but that's largely because I don't like kids, but let's brush that off. But yeah, Emily Mortimer was good as Jane. She did very well. She even looks a little bit like the little girl from the original. I liked Julie Walters as Ellen. She did very well in that. I don't actually like Julie Walters in much. It's an unpopular opinion, but I fucking hate Molly Weasley, so she didn't earn any points with me in the Harry Potter films. But that's a whole nother ballpark. Don't even get me started on that one. Meryl Streep, I've already talked about her. I didn't really care for the Cousin Topsy scene, largely because, again, it was an odd accent. I say odd, that sounds pretty racist, but it was a Russian accent, yes, done by an American actress, and I didn't understand a lot of what she was saying, unfortunately. And I feel like the whole concept of furthering the plot and making a point through a song was a little bit over the top in that particular scene about the whole topsy-turvy world upside down thing. I feel like it was a bit too easy. Like, it was just like a sort of a little barrier just to add drama. Like, no, I won't fix the pot today because it's upside down day. And then Mary Poppins just sings at her saying, yes, but you can see things differently from upside down. And I was like, okay, yes, I will fix pot now because I can see things clearer from this way. You're right. That's basically how that scene went. Colin Firth I've talked about. I love the fact that they had Dick Van Dyke back in it. That man is so old now. He was born in 1925 and he's one of my favourites. I absolutely fucking love Dick Van Dyke. He's so funny. And I love the fact that they got him back in. He's, 93 now, and he did that dance on the table at the end. That was entirely him. Magnificent. And they got Angela Lansbury to voice the balloon lady at the end. That was, for those of you who don't know, the Teapot, Mrs. Teapot. Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast. The original, not the shitty remake. David Warner as Admiral Boom. I feel like they did very well with the casting. And although Lin-Manuel Miranda is definitely not Cockney for the role, he did it very well. Overall, yeah, definitely a 7 out of 10. As I say, I enjoy it. I enjoyed it very much. Not sure I'll buy it though, simply because I'm extraordinarily picky with my films. And the chase scene really switched it off for me, in a way. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so anyway, sorry I haven't actually made any videos recently. I've been run to hell at work because it's spring cleaning season, so I've just been, can't be bothered. Not to mention I haven't really had anything to say. I wanted to wait until I saw Mary Poppins Returns, and then I thought, hey, I can talk about that, whether I loved it or I hated it or whatever. And I'll say I love it. Certainly don't hate it. But yeah. Like, subscribe, all that crap if you wanna. Cool. See ya. Wake up. I hate this fucking phone. Okay.